Welcome to the LSU Sports Insider, brought to you by the journalists at The Advocate, NOLA.com, and the Times-Picayune. I'm Perryn Keys, joined today, as usual, by Wilson Alexander, our lead LSU football beat reporter, and by the venerable one, the longtime one, Mr. Scott Rabalais, our longtime columnist.
Just call me Santa.
Call me Santa. Wait, have you been around? Have you been making the rounds with Santa all this time?
I'm one of his elves, yes.
Oh, well, this is going to be a jolly old time now, jollier than I even imagined. We will get into the ReliaQuest Bowl, LSU versus Wisconsin on January 1st. We will get into a little bit about the transfer portal and recruiting. But first, I think it behooves us to discuss LSU's 2024 schedule, which is finally out now. We, of course, knew who the opponents would be all this time, but we didn't find out until Wednesday night where exactly they'd be playing on the schedule. So we will get into that here very shortly. First, of course, a little bit of business. Please subscribe to The Advocate. To do that, you go to theadvocate.com/subscribe, whether that's our old-fashioned print edition or our digital edition. Please sign up for the LSU newsletter. Of course, that's a daily newsletter, but Rab handles that 3 times a week. You stay up to date with obviously LSU football, LSU men's basketball, women's basketball, gymnastics, baseball, everything coming down the line. Stay up to date, get everything delivered straight to your inbox. To do that, you go to theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. We are here every Monday and Thursday on all our social channels, specifically our YouTube channel, LSU Tigers on NOLA.com. If you catch us, you can catch us live there every Monday afternoon, every Thursday afternoon. If you don't catch us live, you can obviously catch us later on that same YouTube channel. So please subscribe there as well. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever other finer podcasts are found. And of course, this is a holiday season. It's gift-giving season, and we've got some more gifts for you all to give out. We've got obviously our Heisman Trophy posters, our front pages of the Advocate Sports section. Those are now in the Advocate store. You can find those at store.theadvocate.com. Again, that's store.theadvocate.com. And enter the coupon code INSIDER, INSIDER. You get 15% off your purchase. So go on ahead and rush out and do that right this moment. One thing we should always hit up is obviously acknowledge our friends at Champion Wealth Strategies. They are our sponsor here every Monday and Thursday. Champion Wealth Strategies is a national financial services firm specializing in the capital markets, securities, insurance, 401ks, and college and retirement planning. Our broker-dealer is LPL, financial member FINRA, SIPC. As you know, investments are not FDIC insured, may lose value, and have no bank guarantee. Contact Champion Wealth Strategies and plan like a champion today at championwealthstrategies.com. So, gentlemen, we knew that coming in 2024 that LSU would open up against Southern California in Las Vegas. I know that Rab, being the high roller that you are, you were looking forward to that. You were probably going to throw down $10,000 on black and see what happens and go from there.
That doesn't sound like the behavior of one of Santa's elves.
Well, how's he going to pay for all those gifts?
That's true.
You got to figure this out. We knew that already. We, of course, knew that they were going to play UCLA. Oklahoma was going to come onto the schedule, all these types of things. But now we've got the full Monty, so to speak. Open dates on October, 2 open dates next year, October 5th and November 2nd. I actually thought about this. I don't know if you guys remember this, but something I had forgotten about the 2019 season was, as difficult as that schedule was, in some ways it actually set up very well. They had 4 games, had an open date, had 4 more games, then had an open date, and then finished off with their final 4. It's not quite that clean, but it's pretty close. So anything you want to, Wilson, I'll put this to you first. Anything you want to, any takeaways you have from how the schedule unfolds for LSU?
Well, we're going to learn a lot about this team within about 4 weeks because, like you said, opening up in Las Vegas against USC, then you come home against Nichols. Then right after that, a road game at South Carolina. And now South Carolina didn't have a great year this season. Spencer Rattler, their quarterback, is off to the NFL. And so you don't really know much about what that South Carolina team is going to be. You don't know about really what any of these teams might really fully look like, especially here at the beginning of the schedule with USC and then UCLA too, which I'm about to mention comes to Tiger Stadium right after South Carolina. That's still a road game in the SEC, and Williams-Brice Stadium is a tough environment by all accounts. They get Sandstorm playing, which, regardless of whatever your opinion is of that song, it's loud, and they get into it, and they have their shakers going, and they're going to have to be able to take the crowd out of that early. And then, like I said, right after that home game against UCLA, the second half of that home and home that started back in 2021 in the Rose Bowl. And so that 4-game stretch, obviously, like I said, LSU's probably going to be just fine taking care of Nichols, but the other 3, even though you don't yet know much about what those teams are going to look like, USC was not very good this year, even with Caleb Williams. He'll be gone. Defensively, are they going to be able to fix their issues? They went 7-5 in the regular season. UCLA wasn't great either. And Dante Moore, their 5-star quarterback, who I don't think he was their starter this season, if I remember correctly, but he played some, and he's a 5-star, and now he's in the transfer portal, and so. What was that?
No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off midstream. If I'm not mistaken, he started earlier this season and wound up losing his job.
I think so, but that's still like a player you don't want to lose off your roster.
Correct.
And so I think Chip Kelly was it's kind of on the hot seat at some point. Regardless of all of those things, those are 3 of your first 4 games that look like, those are certainly marquee Power 5 games. 2 of them will be in the Big Ten next year. And I think we're going to learn a lot about what this LSU team is pretty quickly in the season as a result of that.
Rab, I didn't until Wilson was going on a little bit about South Carolina. It didn't occur to me until just now. He brings up a fine point. Sort of quietly, one of the most loyal fan bases in the SEC, don't you think?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they've always been. I remember that year, Lou Holtz's first year, they were winless, and they had great crowds there. I've been there for a few games, and it'll be interesting to see if the state fair is going on, because the stadium's off campus. The campus is kind of hemmed in downtown, and so none of the athletic facilities are on campus. And so it'll be interesting to see if that was the only time I've ever been late for an LSU kickoff, covered because I got caught in the state fair traffic.
You were in the cotton candy line, weren't you? Don't lie.
Well, I've been trying to cover up, all these years. Yeah. But
I not for nothing, but this schedule, I thought, frankly, I mean, as daunting as the first month is, and it is daunting. I actually thought maybe the toughest stretch was, between October 12th and November 9th. They do have an open date in between, in one of those weeks there. But October 12th through November 9th is Ole Miss, then at Arkansas. Man, maybe you don't know what Arkansas is. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. At A&M, which I think is still going to be a difficult game, and then Alabama. So you're talking about, and then, as I said, you started off with Ole Miss. Ole Miss is going to come into Baton Rouge this coming season. But those are 4 formidable opponents, I say. And, of course, really, you can make the argument that maybe the final month of the season is maybe not the most difficult, but certainly has sort of the 3 pretty strong brand names. They finish out with Alabama November 9th, at Florida on November 16th, which that's got to be the latest they've ever played Florida, huh?
That was the same week as this year.
That was November 11th.
In 2020, they
week.
played December. But
is that right? They played. Oh, that's right. Yeah, it was the fall game and the Cole Tracy kick in the shoe, and not Cole Tracy, but Cade York. I'm sorry. Anyway, so they finish up against Vanderbilt, and then they get Oklahoma to close out the season, which I thought was kind of a little bit of a surprise. Don't you think?
That was a surprise. I'm kind of looking at the long term of it. The SEC. What could be, and again, this is a kind of a temporary schedule format. They did away with divisional play, and you're going to have, so LSU doesn't play Auburn and Mississippi State, two teams they've played every year since for many years, and so the SEC moved the LSU Texas A&M game to October instead of the last weekend of the season. Texas A&M is going to play Texas at home, the renewal of that rivalry on the last weekend of the season, which is when they always used to play. So you kind of think going forward that's likely to be. So who is LSU going to play the last game of the season? Because everybody's got somebody. It's that old thing with LSU. Everybody else has got somebody. Miss State's got Ole Miss. Alabama's got Auburn. All these other games. So they picked LSU to play Oklahoma. I thought it was going to be Arkansas. I thought LSU was going to send them both.
Right.
I'm personally glad they're not sending LSU because the weather's always dreadful in late November in Fayetteville. Whenever LSU plays up there, it's an icebox. But Oklahoma. This seems like a one-off. This, of course, the first time Oklahoma will play in Tiger Stadium. First time LSU and Oklahoma played anywhere but a bowl game. And it's they don't have anybody else that they could play either the last weekend of the season. They're going to keep playing Texas, but that's in October, their state fair game in Dallas. And so I thought it was interesting that they picked LSU to play Oklahoma because Oklahoma's got Alabama and LSU to back-to-back to finish the season. Talk about a tough finish. And I didn't think they were going to do that to Oklahoma. I thought it was going to be Arkansas.
Well,
Yeah.
look, I mean,
And before that, so Oklahoma, they've got a bye. They've got a very late bye because of this double bye situation where they go at Missouri, bye week, Bama, at LSU. And Missouri, if they can continue to play the way they did this year, I mean, gosh, they're going to a New Year's Six bowl game. That's even though you have a bye there separating things, that's a tough ending of the season for
Who knows if
Oklahoma.
they will, but they'll be ranked probably to start next season. Missouri will. So
Yeah.
it's a tough schedule. So I think it's still going to be intriguing to see what LSU winds up with, because they got to play somebody that last weekend of the season when you have all these traditional rivalries playing. I think it could still be Arkansas, but if it's not this year, and we'll see if they stick with the 8-game format.
Oklahoma
they go to 9
doesn't.
or whatever.
Oklahoma doesn't kind of have a dance
Well, they
partner
don't.
either.
I mean,
So that's what makes it
LSU
interesting.
But LSU's not. Everything we've heard, LSU is not going to play Oklahoma on an annual basis.
Right.
In an 8-game format, the one permanent opponent we've said, as Wilson wrote today, would be Texas A&M. If they go to 9, it would probably be A&M, Ole Miss, and Alabama. So, Oklahoma, you feel, their one annual opponent is going to be Texas, one permanent opponent at least. So it'll be interesting. Maybe they'll throw it all out of the window. I mean, we don't know.
Gosh, that's why I kind of put that asterisk in there. It's like barring changes, because that's what
Right.
we both heard and what we've reported, like you said, with those potential permanent opponents. But they haven't settled on 8 or 9 games, and if they go to 8 and it is A&M, then that would probably be the logical last game of the season, because then A&M wouldn't have Texas on its schedule every single year.
That's true.
But if they go to 9 games and A&M does play Texas every year, I think that would probably be one of their permanent opponents. Then maybe I'm mistaken in that, but okay. So just hypothetically, if A&M, if we go to 9 and you have your 3 permanent opponents, and A&M is always playing Texas at the end of the regular season, but LSU still has Texas A&M, Ole Miss, and Alabama as its 3 permanents, then I have no idea who you put on rivalry weekend, because Ole Miss would play.
Yeah, I'm talking about
Arkansas,
and this gets confusing. They're not LSU's. We haven't heard is going to play Arkansas every year.
Yeah,
either. So
I
that
mean,
wouldn't
because
be a
Ole
game.
Miss would have the Egg Bowl against Mississippi State, Alabama would have the Iron Bowl against Auburn, and say in
It would have to
this
be
is a
A&M.
9-game format, say Texas and Texas A&M are playing on rivalry weekend, it would just end up being, I would have to think,
a rotating game.
just a random opponent every year.
And that's not
Who's
really
to-
what you want.
Well, but who's to say that's what you want or what you don't want? I mean, if you don't have a permanent, a permanent arch rival, permanent opponent, first of all, there's nothing in the rules that says you can't have a rotating opponent. Second of all, it may behoove you in some years, may be to your detriment in other years, but it may behoove you. Look at that. Hey, Vanderbilt's at the end of the schedule. How about that?
And I will say this, for LSU, since they stopped playing Tulane every year, LSU's rivalry weekend opponent was Tulane forever and ever.
Right.
When Tulane was in the SEC, and even after they left the SEC in 1965, and it stayed that way until well into the 90s. So, obviously that's not a game that's going to come back, but some schools have that game. Like Florida's got Florida State, Georgia's got Georgia Tech. So it's there's still a lot to be settled here, and people. I guess what we should say with all of this is no one should look at this coming year's schedule and think that this is a real
This is
indicator
not
of
how
what-
it's going to be in perpetuity.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. It's they're far from settled. They haven't even settled on 8 or 9 conference games, obviously. So, who they play is obviously up in the air as well.
So I don't know if this was something you were going to bring up, Perryn, but I'll go ahead and pose this question to Rab. So you've seen the schedule. We're obviously a long way off from really knowing much about what this LSU team is going to be, because there's so much roster stuff that has to change. I hate looking at next fall when we're not even done with this season. We've still got a bowl game to play. But I'm curious, just your initial thoughts about how this sets up for LSU in a year when the 12-team playoff begins.
Well, I thought watching the telethon that was the SEC schedule reveal show last night, 2 hours, ESPN. Oh my gosh! But Greg McElroy made a good point. We don't know how the committee will value the strong non-conference games, right? And you see most of the SEC teams playing them. Alabama's going to Wisconsin, LSU's bowl opponent coming up. Texas is going to Michigan, I think. Georgia's got a lot of. It seems like all of Georgia's games are away
They
from
have
home.
a doozy. It's interesting. We're saying this schedule's tough for LSU. It looks like a lot of the SEC schedules are really tough. Florida's last 5-6 games of the regular season look
Florida
like a doozy.
Florida may have the toughest schedule in the nation, period.
Yeah,
Good luck, Billy.
Yeah, and they're not ducking. You say what you want about Florida. They're not ducking anybody. They're playing Miami and Florida State.
And Central Florida.
So it's the schedule for LSU. I think sets up like a lot of other schedules. It's tough, and for the college football playoff, everyone's banking on that the committee will say, one loss doesn't kill you. Obviously we know Florida State went undefeated and they didn't get into the playoff this year, but they'd be well inside a playoff next year. It'd just be a question of do they get a
an automatic qualifier? Probably.
Yeah, they would. So
it'd
be a top 4.
We're also trying to make heads or tails out of what the committee is going to do. This is apples and oranges. I understand a little bit, but Liberty got the Group of 5 New Year's 6 bid. Liberty, I think, if I'm not mistaken, had the 133rd ranked strongest schedule. In other words, the weakest schedule in the nation, went undefeated and got rewarded for it instead of SMU or whoever the American champion was going to be. I was going to ask you, getting back to LSU's schedule, Rab, they're, as you mentioned, Wilson, they're going to try to win the Big Ten Western Front next year. USC and UCLA, South Alabama was a strong team this year. Actually, they were loaded down with seniors, lots of 4th and 5th year players. They went in and beat Oklahoma State, whipped them pretty good, actually. And Tulane roughed them up, which surprised that they opened up a Tulane, and Tulane roughed them up pretty good. Anyway, South Alabama looks like they may, seniors or no seniors, may be a formidable opponent, even as a Sun Belt opponent.
At least tougher than what you normally expect from that kind of game.
Correct. So Nicholls State, you think, is the only one that's probably going to be anything close to a walkover. I'll just put it to you, Rab. You've obviously covered LSU since 1911. When was
Doc Fenton?
Is this the toughest? Is this the toughest schedule that LSU's ever faced?
Yeah, incredible for 130.
Yeah, I went with Doc Fenton and the Tigers to Havana in 1907 for that game. Yes, it's the toughest in a long time, and I think you have to go back to the late 80s or the 80s when you only had 6 conference games and an 11-game schedule, so you had to find a lot of teams to play. And in 1988. LSU went to Ohio State. They went to Ohio State and Florida back-to-back. They played Auburn, which was at the top of their game. LSU ended up SEC co-champions with Auburn. That was the year of the earthquake game when the Tommy Hudson to Eddie Fuller pass. They played Alabama, of course, and they played Miami, who just dusted LSU in a driving range. 44 to 3. Yeah, it was just, man, Miami wasn't even I don't think it was a national champion for no, it was Notre Dame won that year.
Yeah, that's right.
Notre Dame won that year. So, but they were really good with Steve Walsh as a quarterback and everything, a future Saint. It's probably the toughest since then, I would say, because you have USC and UCLA. We don't know quite how good they're going to be, but they're certainly respectable, traditional powers. And then, like I said, South Alabama's no slouch, and then you've got adding Oklahoma, this historic game in Tiger Stadium, and most of the usual cast of characters, Alabama, Ole Miss, and Texas A&M, and people like that. So going to Arkansas, never an easy game for LSU. It seems never an easy game. So and the South Carolina, it's they're going to be. It would make their season to beat any of the Tigers, Clemson or LSU. So it's probably the toughest since then. I would say since going way back. But now that was the year, like I said, LSU wound up they won 8-4, but they were SEC co-champions. So you can have success, but LSU will have to be on their game to have success.
I feel like when you look at this schedule, 10-2, you're in the playoff. I would have
100%. Yeah.
9-3, you maybe even are still in. I look at the schedule, my initial look at it, just again, this is not even knowing what this team and how every other team sort of looks like it. Maybe to revisit this in preseason camp kind of thing, would be that I would not expect LSU to go undefeated. I think in this day and age, especially with the 12-team playoff, it's like
that's okay.
It is okay, and that's a whole other ball of wax. Because I still kind of like it when every single game really matters. But it will be kind of nice. I mean, at the end of the regular season, like say this year, if there had been a 12-team playoff, if you're around LSU, if you're a fan of LSU, covering LSU, whatever, we would have been like, oh, is there any way that they can still get in? It's like late in the season, there'll be a lot of teams in the mix with more stakes going on. I guess in some respect. Let's talk about
that. Remember when they projected this year's CFP standings onto the bracket, and they got LSU and Oklahoma last 2 out. Yeah, 12 and 13. So LSU was, we would be saying LSU was, again, a touchdown against Ole Miss away.
On the cusp of making the playoff.
Making the playoff.
At the same time, Alabama beating Auburn in the Iron Bowl would have been theatrical and dramatic, but it wouldn't have mattered if Alabama had lost anyway.
Correct.
At the end of the season. So that's all a whole other maybe topic of discussion. But just to say, this schedule looks daunting, but if LSU can go 10-2 and maybe even 9-3, then there's a good chance that you are at least in championship, in playoff contention. So.
To add something to what you said, not knowing everyone's strengths and weaknesses, what they have coming back and not. I just think looking at everybody's schedule, I'm going to say right now, I'll be surprised if anyone makes it through undefeated in the SEC with what they've got to play. With adding Texas and Oklahoma, a lot of teams are playing these tough non-conference games.
I will be surprised if somebody makes it undefeated through the Big Ten, because when you add 18 teams, and a lot of them are going to be heavyweights. Washington and Oregon certainly had fine seasons this year. It's going to be a doozy. I think this is going to be sort of the I hate to compare it to the NFL because it's definitely not the NFL, but I mean, you just sort of have to assume that even, maybe one or two teams go undefeated, but by and large, most of the 12-team field is going to have 1 or 2 losses on its resume. So to make the playoff, LSU is going to have to hustle. They're going to have to fill out that roster, obviously, and that's what they're going to have to do, obviously, between now and not only, well, I was going to say now and spring practice, but really now and January. Well, that's not true. The transfer portal window closes January 4th. It does not mean that you can't continue to commit to a team until after that.
You just have to be in the portal by that day.
Exactly.
And
right.
then it opens up again at the end of spring practice, which is when LSU got Logan Diggs.
So the window is open for players to announce that the players to put themselves into the transfer portal, and will remain that way until January 4th. There's nearly 2,000 names in the portal. And, of course, LSU, we've mentioned many times now that LSU is not going to shop quite as heavily in the portal, but going to have to be pretty selective and going to have to hustle to finish out this recruiting class, too. LSU, if I'm not mistaken, has the second fewest number of names in the portal now, second only to Alabama, which last I saw only had 3 names in the portal. Wilson, what do you sort of make about where they stand in the transfer portal and who they might be taking a long look at?
In terms of what they've lost so far, nothing that necessarily shocks you or causes great concern for how it might affect next season. A lot of guys who were maybe further down the depth chart, going somewhere for more playing time, or at least trying to. I think a great example of that in particular would be Marlon Martinez, backup offensive lineman, a person who else you would probably still like to have on the roster next year because of his experience. He's played in a lot of football games, but he's got 1 year of eligibility left, and he's going to go try to play somewhere because he probably wouldn't have been a starter next season.
Right.
And the only other one, who also has entered so far, who I'm sure LSU would have liked to have kept, would be Quincy Wiggins. In terms of next season, still probably not a starter, maybe even not like a huge rotational player, because you look at him playing, defensive end. Savion Jones probably comes back. Paris Shan probably comes back. Those are 2 guys that are ahead of him, and you kind of got a logjam there. But that's someone who LSU probably would have loved to have kept around and kept developing, and because he's got a lot of athletic potential. But really, by and large, there's just hasn't been a whole lot of players who have left who I think would have had a major effect on next season. Meanwhile, who LSU is looking at, like you said, and Brian Kelly's words were that they were able to this year be much more targeted. And we said they're probably not expected to bring in the sheer numbers that they did the last 2 years, where there was 14, 15 transfers in that kind of range. And this year, a few folks to maybe keep an eye on at this point. LSU, no one's popped for LSU really, really quickly, but there's still certainly a few to keep an eye on, and we've mentioned them already, I think before mostly, is Jordan Gilbert, safety from Texas A&M,
right.
Xavier Thomas, wide receiver from Mississippi State. One who entered the portal just this week, who will be, I think, interesting to keep an eye on, is Mississippi State cornerback Dekamarion Richardson. He's from Bossier High School, from Cullen, Louisiana. He's played a lot of football at Mississippi State, appeared in 45 games, made 26 starts, started all 12 games this season. And we know that LSU, they're also looking at Jair Brown, the cornerback from Ohio State. Mm-hmm. And these are all guys with Louisiana ties who would fill positions of need. Jordan being a safety, that's someone who can come in and play right away. Richardson and Brown give you some cornerback depth with a little bit of power. I mean, Richardson looks like a plug-and-play kind of guy with the amount of time that he started. Brown hasn't started quite as much, but he is at least played a little bit at Ohio State, a Power 5 kind of guy.
Right.
That would be a nice addition to that room. And then same thing with Xavier Thomas, addresses a couple needs. One, he's probably your punt returner right off the bat. And then 2, he is able to compete for playing time at wide receiver. So we'll see how long it takes for. I think the guys who would commit sooner would probably be Xavier Thomas, Jordan Gilbert, Jair Brown would probably be sooner rather than later. Richardson might be a little bit later. I mean, he just entered the portal,
right?
And then Will Sheppard. I don't know if LSU has offered Will Sheppard yet. I think they are maybe interested in Will Sheppard, the Vanderbilt wide receiver. We'll see kind of how that one unfolds as well. I think Will's got a good bit of time to be able to make a decision. But he's, again, another Louisiana native. And as we said, it kind of depends on, I think, how the numbers shake out and who comes back in LSU's wide receiver room.
This is the LSU Sports Insider Podcast, brought to you by the journalists at The Advocate, NOLA.com, and the Times-Picayune. You know where to find all our writers' great work. That's at theadvocate.com. And so if you don't subscribe, whether that's via the print edition or digitally or both, please do so. Go to theadvocate.com/subscribe. Stay up to date with our LSU newsletter. Rab handles that 3 times a week, but it's a daily newsletter. You can stay up to date with all the LSU football news, baseball, men's basketball, women's basketball, gymnastics, and whatever else may come down the line. Get everything delivered straight to your inbox. To do that, you go to theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. We're here every Monday and Thursday afternoon on all our social channels, specifically our YouTube channel, LSU Tigers on NOLA.com. If you don't find us there live on Monday or Thursday afternoon, you can find us later on there on that same YouTube channel. And you can also find us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever other finer podcasts are found. And while you're listening to the dulcet tones of Scott Rabalais and Wilson Alexander on our podcast, do a little bit of shopping. Go ahead and check out the Advocate store. Go to store.theadvocate.com and do a little searching for some LSU championship posters. And, of course, Jaden Daniels just won the Heisman Trophy. We have that poster up and available at the Advocate store as well. So you go to store.theadvocate.com. And for now, if you enter the coupon code INSIDER, INSIDER, you get 15% off your purchase. We are brought to you today and every day, every Monday and Thursday, by Champion Wealth Strategies. Go to championwealthstrategies.com and plan like a champion today. One other thing to wrap up sort of LSU recruiting and the LSU recruiting field before we turn our attention a little bit to the ReliaQuest Bowl is just the class itself. It ranks number 12 in the nation, which, look, frankly, that's,
at least on 24/7.
But yes, I'm sorry, according to 24/7 composite. So that's really not where you typically see LSU. You expect to see LSU somewhere between 1 and 5, really, or at the very least in the top 10. And so this sort of brings up a topic that's kind of been touchy is not quite the right word for it, but listen, there have been and exist and remain concerns about Brian Kelly and his staff as recruiters. And I will just put this to you. Well, I'll put this to you, Wilson, first. What can LSU do between now and either the early signing period or February to sort of get that class a little bit higher up? Who's out there that they can maybe take a look at and are still in play for?
The two, and this would be by February, the two that would make the biggest difference, I think, would be Dominic McKinley and Terry Bussey. These are both Texas A&M commitments, 5 stars who LSU is still in the mix for. LSU had an in-home visit with Dominic McKinley and his family this week, and he's, of course, the number 1 player in Louisiana at a major position of need for LSU. He committed to Texas A&M on, I believe it was September 1st, around that time period, right at the beginning of his senior season. But there's a lot going on with Texas A&M right now with Jimbo Fisher leaving. Elijah Robinson, their defensive line coach, he's now at Syracuse. We've seen a lot of defections from Texas A&M, and it seems like McKinley is sort of taking his time to fully assess and make the right decision for him. So LSU had that in-home visit on Tuesday with Frank Wilson and Brian Kelly. And then Dominic McKinley's mom told on 3 that he'll be waiting until February to sign. And so that does end up being the case. Then LSU is going to have a few months to try to make a push. Right. And that would be huge if they can end up getting him. And then Bussey is, like I said, a 5-star athlete, someone LSU has been trying to work on. He remains committed to Texas A&M. But that could be someone who, again, is, I think, waiting until February as far as I know. And so those would probably be the 2 that come to mind the most, that if LSU could end up flipping them and landing those 2, you help that class out a lot. Because right now, like you said, this class, it's hard to know fully what to make of a class until really it gets in there and develops. But like you said, it's 12, which is not what LSU is used to signing and what LSU fans are used to seeing. You've only got right now, according to 24/7, 3 top 100 players. Jelani Watkins, a wide receiver from Texas, kind of a speedster guy. He's 5'9", 160 pounds. Trey'Dez Green, the tight end from Zachary, who's like one of the top tight ends in the whole country. That's a huge player who could probably help out in some respects right away. And then Deshaun McBride, a safety from Denham Springs, who number 50 nationally on 24/7, top 3 at his position. That's a fantastic player to have in your class in any year, but especially right now with what else you needs to build at safety. And so, but those are like the only 3 top 100 guys. But you would add 2 more top 100 guys if you can get Dominic McKinley and Terry Bussey.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I think we look at the numbers, the recruiting numbers, and it's important, but you just gotta be in the mix. And I would say the recruiting class is one thing, but on 3 and I think 24/7, they both do a ranking that combines a school's high school recruiting class, incoming freshmen, and transfers, and that's transfers are such a big part of it now. You have to include that. You have to say, especially since those are guys who are more likely to play, right away, to step in and be a starter for you or a key player. And I'll also say this, 2 of the schools in the college football playoff this year, Michigan and Washington, the 2 undefeated teams, they're not schools that have usually ranked. Michigan's not always way up there, and Washington's certainly not in recruiting, and they're in the college football playoff. You got to have the right mix of players. You got to develop them once you get them here. It's important to get talent. And I would say it's not the greatest year in Louisiana. That's probably a mitigating factor as well. And next year is supposed to be
following year is supposed to be a lot
better. And so people shouldn't. Number 12 is not a reason for LSU fans to push a panic button or anything like that. Wait till you see how the transfers come in, and wait till you see how and no one wants to wait, of course, but they're okay. They're doing okay. Could they do better? Sure, but they're doing okay, good enough to compete.
To revert to your point, Michigan currently has the 17th ranked recruiting class in the country on 24/7. But at the same token, recruiting, it does definitely matter. And I mean, you look constantly, Georgia and Alabama are 1-2 or 1-2. In that 1 to 3 range every single year.
And where do they finish?
Right now, they're always competing for championships.
That's right.
And you have to be able to recruit in the SEC to keep up with everybody.
And this is a concern, frankly, that's followed Brian Kelly on and off throughout his career. Wilson, I know you have this up right now. Isn't Notre Dame something like 5th or 6th right
they're
now?
Currently 7th.
I'm sorry?
7th,
which is it's higher than LSU's is right now. And there was always concern. The concern that always followed, or the narrative that often followed Notre Dame in recruiting is that, well, hey, they have high academic standards, and they have to sort of be very, very select or more selective than the average, say, SEC school in terms of who they can bring in and stuff like that. They got to go national. They don't have a nearby recruiting base to pull from and things like that. But Marcus Freeman's got the number 7 class, and it seems, at least on the surface over the past 2 years, that he's sort of a more naturally skilled recruiter than maybe his predecessor was. The only reason I bring this up is, listen, LSU's not striking out left and right on recruits, but by the same token, it does call into question, well, okay, we know that Brian Kelly is likely to have changes coming to his staff, and therefore, Rab, I would put it to you, how important is it for him to find some good recruiters, some good teachers, but also some good recruiters on that staff?
Brian Kelly needs, he probably needs to be going, Corey Raymond, yeah, we'd love for you to come back. Big mistake that we let you go to Florida. Certainly. Is he the most dynamic recruiter as a head coach? Probably not. So you got to get people who can help you. Yes, bringing Frank Wilson back was a big get. People thought letting Corey Raymond go was a mistake, and we'll see if he comes back. And, obviously, LSU still has a defensive backs coach at this point. So. There's a lot of things going into it, and of course, there's the whole NIL component to it. That's continuing to evolve. We're seeing that maybe these collectives are going to be kind of legislated in a different way, right? I mean, it could be something that's going to change in the future.
I mean, there's so much up in the air right now.
Yeah, let's just say that there's so much up in the air with recruiting and how NIL impacts it and everything that that's a mitigating factor too for Brian Kelly and LSU. Can they be as competitive as some of these other schools? So
I would be less worried about LSU in terms of NIL right now, as their branding is so strong. We've seen that with other sports.
And just as some background, for how LSU kind of approaches NIL in general is, Kelly's on the record sort of saying this, that like they want everybody to have some NIL. This is just for the football team at least. We'll start with because that's what we're talking about. Every scholarship player is getting some NIL money through LSU's collective, but basically they try to pitch them on what you can do with this brand like that you're mentioning. Look at Olivia Dunn and Angel Reese, and I mean Jaden is made. Brian Kelly told ESPN at one point this season that Jaden was making more money through NIL than he would have on a rookie contract based on what his draft projection was. And so that you can build up your brand through here, but they aren't quite like known for, at least in the NIL space, being some of the ones who's just like throwing money around. Right. And neither is, like Georgia doesn't have that reputation either. There's some other schools, like top schools competing for titles, that like have taken, that similar sort of approach. Texas A&M is known as one for throwing money around. Seems like maybe Florida State's known for sort of throwing some money around in the NIL world. But LSU is the word that always comes up when you talk to people around LSU about NIL is they want to be sustainable with it. And that is kind of how Brian Kelly's taken the approach to it as well, that they aren't necessarily going to...
you can't just throw money at the problem.
Yeah, exactly. That he really values, like we said, development and getting the right kind of people in the program. NIL matters and it's a factor in all those things, but that's just kind of how LSU has tried to approach it from what I understand.
So as we move down the road, obviously we've got one more game to watch LSU in this season, such as it is. You two gentlemen know how I feel about bowl games anymore. They're and I don't think this is really a revelatory comment to make. They're really more pre-spring than they are postseason anymore. It's almost a chance to take a look at what you've got coming into the spring more so than it is to try to. Don't misunderstand me. They're trying to get to a 10-win season. That's, Brian Kelly has made that abundantly clear over and over and over again. But we both suspect that there will be some key players missing. I will just, first things first, I'll put it to both you guys. I know we've done this before, but Rab, yes or no, do you expect Jaden Daniels to play in Tampa?
No, I don't. But something tells me that the fact that he won the Heisman make him want to be out there one more time with his teammates. But no, all things considered, you have to expect now that he won't play.
Wilson?
Yeah, I would be surprised if he played, but we haven't heard from Jaden Daniels yet. So let's kind of wait to find out.
The more time goes on, I would think that leans towards
LSU's in the middle of bowl practice right now, and we don't know if yes or no if he has been practicing.
Right. Well, if he does play, he certainly has earned the right to play, and if that's how he wants to go out, then certainly nobody will say no to him.
And from an LSU perspective, it's there's two sides of a coin. One side you could say, yeah, he wanted to play again. He was a dynamic player. LSU leads the nation in total offense and scoring, and he's a big reason why. And then the flip side of it is you want to see what Garrett Nussmeier can do. You want him to, because he's going to be the heir apparent, and he's going to be taking the first snap in Las Vegas on September 1st, and you want to see him get some valuable experience. So there's pluses to both sides and negatives as well, I guess.
A couple people we do know who were at practice, at least on Monday, as LSU started bowl prep, was Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas, Logan Diggs. So we'll see what kind of happens at quarterback. But in terms of skill personnel, LSU seems to have some of its starters who would be guys who you might wonder if they would opt out because they have NFL draft decisions coming up. They were on the field.
Interesting. That's interesting. So, that leads to the next topic that I wanted to just sort of do a little lightning round with you guys. I wanted to say,
ooh, the lightning round.
Well, with that in mind, with okay, will they or won't they? That's part of the reason I'm asking. They're going to hit you with these sort of lightning round questions because they sort of inform your answer, I think. So, some sort of best guesses on over-unders in this bowl game that they're going to play against the Badgers. Garrett Nussmeier, over-under 200 yards passing. Well, maybe the first question is over/under 1 yard passing.
So you gotta go with will he play or not?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh gosh. Can I qualify it?
Sure.
Okay. If Jaden Daniels doesn't play, then I will say yes, he hits the over. If Jaden Daniels does play. But even if they were to maybe want to do a rotation like they did in the Citrus Bowl last year, because this would be a logical time to do it.
Sure.
I would say under that he's more at like the 150 range.
Okay. So let's just play pretend and say Garrett Nussmeier plays a significant amount of snaps, Rab, over under 200 yards.
Over.
Okay. Caleb Jackson, over under 10 carries.
Under.
Under.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, over under 50 yards.
Under.
All right,
Under,
then. Yeah. Given especially what you just mentioned about Logan Diggs being in practice,
if Logan
which
Diggs
frankly surprises
plays,
me.
and even if he doesn't, you still got Josh Williams, you still got Noah Cain, you've got so many bodies in that backfield that getting over 50 yards would require probably breaking off a long one at some point, and 10 carries, that's a lot when you have that many people vying for touches.
That's true. That maybe should have been a better question for either Logan Diggs or Josh Williams, for that matter. Because I mean, is there a single person that you've ever found who's got a bad word to say about Josh Williams? Don't you think it would stand to reason that they'd want to give him as many shots, on the field as they can, whether he comes back or not.
I mean, it'd be all purely situational, and when he's getting in the game. I mean, you're not just going to hand him the ball like copious amounts of times, because they have guys who they've clearly, kind of found some roles for here and there. He's more of this season been kind of like your third down back at times, and so the only person who I would even think about saying would maybe have more than 10 carries based on what we've seen all season would be Logan Diggs. And even toward the end of the year, Jaden was running so much that, Logan's production kind of trailed off. He was also injured at one point.
He sat out.
But even like in the Texas A&M game, I think he only had like 5 carries.
He wasn't in there for much. Yeah. I was actually surprised he was in the game at all. So.
I will qualify my Caleb Jackson answer by saying I would like to see him carry the ball because I want to see if he's going to deliver the payload to a safety or a linebacker on Wisconsin's team, like we've seen him do a couple of times.
The entertainment value is certainly there. So last one, and we've kind of touched on this already. We've sort of shown our hand, but Malik Neighbors over under 1 yard receiving.
Over. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Over.
Does he break the record? He needs 22 to break?
Yes. I think he needs 22. LSU had a different number in a press release or of some kind today, but so my math has been confused for like weeks on what exactly he needs, but I think it's 22.
He needs 20 some odd to break.
I think he gets there. I think he gets there comfortably. The more interesting question would be like over or under 100 because, does he stay in the game? Does he play the whole game? He wants to break the record and I mean, like we said, this is kind of an exhibition, and I don't know if he's playing. He probably plays pretty much like at least the first half, and they kind of see what the score is. But I could see this being a game where he doesn't go over 100 simply because maybe he doesn't play like the entirety of the game like he has all season.
And whether he plays or not, or how much he plays or not, is at least it's refreshing to me to see a college athlete to whom the record means something. If you wind up as LSU's all-time leading receiver, you've done better than Jamar Chase. You've done better than Justin Jefferson. You've done better than Josh Reed. You've done better than Wendell Davis going back, or Andy Hamilton. Or a lot of great receivers that have come through this school. So I'm really pleased that he's at least wrestling with the notion. And if you say he's practicing, then there's certainly a strong indication that he wants to play.
One other topic I did want to bring up here.
What about some defensive over-unders?
I'm sorry. Oh, well, by all means, you guys can grill me if you want. Like.
Okay, I'll try to think of a couple for y'all. Over/under 2 sacks for Harold Perkins.
I'll say over because this seems, if we're sort of quote unquote exhibition mode, which this game kind of is but kind of isn't, then what better time to just try to sort of turn them loose? Go get that guy. Makes sense to me that he could get to 2. I'd say it's a push.
A push. Interesting. I'm gonna say under.
Okay. All right. Over/under 7 tackles for Whit Weeks.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one.
That's a good. Oh, you nailed us to the wall on that one. That's tough. I would say 7. 7 is a lot. I'm going to say under, but not by a ton, because it does feel like a game where you sort of like. I don't want to say like empty the bench like he's a walk-on or something like that, but you're going to play a lot of players because why wouldn't you? And look, there's a kind of a mini recruiting aspect to this too, right? Keep them involved, keep them motivated, keep them invested. So I would say, I would I would make sure he gets out there and let him run around a good bit, but I'm not so sure he gets to 7. That's a tough number.
If you said Greg Penn, I'd say over for sure, but I'm going to say under as well for Wood Weeks.
I knew Greg Penn would be an easier answer.
That's easy. That was a good one. You got us on
Okay,
that.
I'll give you guys 2 more. Over, under 1.5. Can you do 1.5? I mean, obviously you can't
Sure.
have 1.5 interceptions, but we'll just say 1.5 for the purposes of this. 1.5 interceptions as a team. Basically, do they get to 2?
Is Mordecai playing in this game?
As far as I know. The only one the offensive player who's most notable for them, who I know has not.
It's Braylon Allen.
Yeah.
I'll say because Tanner Mordecai is an experienced hand, if nothing else. So I will say under.
Under.
But that's a good one too. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I'll say under. I would say that maybe they get 1.
Okay, I'm going to do one. Will Wisconsin be more than 50% on third down conversions?
Also, when it comes to Mordecai, he was out indefinitely after having surgery on a broken hand in October. So
yeah, that's why I was asking. When he left that offense, that was when this was always going to be a transition for the Badgers. You know, they went from I formation, classic Big Ten 3 yards in a cloud of dust with big, huge offensive linemen and a good fullback and a good tight end and all that, to Phil Longo coming in and, you know, implementing air raid concepts and 5 wide concepts. It was always going to be a difficult transition. They banked on Tanner Mordecai to, you know, be there to sort of really help with that transition and really sort of guide him through it. And then he got hurt and they fell off a cliff, as evidenced by no better game than the Iowa game when they, you know, could barely get a first down in the second half. So that's a good one. That's a good one. I'm sorry. Who are we?
Rabs is Wisconsin over 50% on third down?
I'm going to say no, regardless of who plays quarterback, just for the simple reason that, like, LSU will have had several practices to sort of get this thing straight and right. Whereas instead of going week to week, and now you're having to scout for it, you know, you have to plan for a different opponent every week.
You'll spend almost a month honed in on this
you're
one
spending
opponent.
so much time on the opponent instead of having spent, you know, maybe less time on fundamentals and everything like that. It's
I'm going to say no, but not for that reasoning, because all season it didn't seem to matter on third down.
Well, and one thing we know that Wisconsin can still, Braylon Allen or no Braylon Allen, we know Wisconsin offensive linemen they know how to run block, right? Mm-hmm. And didn't we see LSU struggle with run fits, you know, misdirection, sweeps, all that type of stuff? So maybe Wisconsin, maybe they get down there in Tampa and say, hey, screw this. We want to win this game. We're not going to throw the ball. We're just going to run.
Well, so I'm going to say that I'm going to take the under on 50% because without having Braylon Allen, I'm not sure exactly who Wisconsin's lead back is going to be. And he was kind of their offense for most of the season. Also Wisconsin was a pretty good third down team. Their offense had some problems, but maybe because they were setting up manageable third downs, they were 28th in the country on third down on offense, for roughly 45%. LSU was 119th at roughly 45% on defense. So I'm going to say no, but just under. So let's go 45%. Wisconsin's 45% on offense.
Similar percentage, but they're one of the best in the country, and LSU is one of the worst. That's interesting.
Any other propositions? Any other prop bets?
How about putts for Jay Bramblett?
That's kind of a fun one.
Well, that goes back to what Jaden's
what, 3 all season.
Yeah, never had more than 4 in a game. I don't even know if never had more than 4 in a game.
I'll say 3 just because I even if Jaden plays, I'll say that maybe there's some, just as you said, maybe there's some sort of rotational deal where Garrett, and God bless Garrett Nussmeier, not trying to pile onto him or whatever. But there's some rust. Garrett Nussmeier's, nobody could possibly be as efficient as Jaden Daniels, so you figure there's going to be a few more 3 and outs.
I don't see whoever plays quarterback. They're going for like 45 on Wisconsin. I just don't see it. I think there's going to be.
If Jaden plays, I could see it. If Garrett plays, I would probably take it more in like the 30s range, because Wisconsin has not allowed a team to score more than 24 points in a game. That was except for one time this whole season. They've had a tough defense, and they've done a good job of limiting explosive plays. All right, I'm going to go one more, a deep cut kind of prop bet. Over under 15 defensive snaps for Deshaun Womack. Basically, does he play?
That's interesting, because certainly he flashed at times.
Yeah.
He definitely flashed, and he's an intriguing. Speaking of great recruits, right? He was and remains an intriguing prospect. I would have to say, given the nature of this game being, as we say, pre-spring exhibition, however you want to call it, you want to keep him invested and motivated and everything like that. I say yes. I say 15 snaps.
Yes, I do. Good question, though.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to put you in a captain's chair.
Look at me. I'm the captain now.
Oh goodness. Well, Captain, step aside for just a moment. We're going to wrap this up with a women's basketball topic. Rab, obviously, Kateri Poole, word came out that, as expected, she is no longer with the LSU women's basketball team. Just your thoughts on sort of where that leaves LSU. Obviously, she was a great defensive presence, had such a key role in LSU's march to the championship last year. Any thoughts on that? Where LSU stands now, what they do, and anything about the backcourt depth?
Yeah, I think from a pure talent wise, she can be replaced, and they have other players who have stepped up. Obviously, namely Michaela Williams, the freshman from Bossier City, who has lived up to a lot of the hype. But it hurts from a depth standpoint, and having already lost Samaya Smith, and they can score. They're kind of like LSU's football team a little bit. They can score now. Anissa Morrow can score. Angel Reese can certainly score. Michaela Williams can score. Floja Johnson can get hot. Haley Van Lith when she's healthy, and she's missed the last couple of games. But they're still looking for that defensive stopper, and rim protector and something like that. And they've had to bring along Aaliyah Del Rosario, the freshman who's 6'5" and a 5-star prospect, to bring her along faster than they wanted to. They can weather that storm, because I think Poole was definitely being relegated to a reserve role, but they can't afford one more big injury or disciplinary defection or something like that.
I will say this: they marched to the championship basically with an 8-person rotation last year, so. Never say never. Although, just as you said, the defensive presence was certainly a little bit stronger last year.
And if I will mention real quick as a sideline, I mentioned Haley Van Lith, who could be that defensive stopper. She's been bothered by plantar fasciitis in her left hands. She had a brace on it. Kim Mulkey said if it was the NCAA tournament, she could have played the other night against McNeese, but they're trying to be cautious. Look, they're going to win all their non-conference games with or without her until they open SEC play in early January. So, will we see her before then? I don't know, but they're taking it slow with her, and they got every opportunity to do so.
We will be here for the rest of women's basketball season. Obviously, we will be back here on Monday to discuss perhaps maybe some news in the transfer portal. Perhaps not. We'll find out.
Signing day next Wednesday.
Signing day will be upon us. The transfer portal, of course, news will presumably remain hot and heavy there, and then maybe after signing day we'll find out a little bit more about the coaching staff. Maybe not. We'll see. But we will be back on Monday to again take up these topics and discuss them all. We are here every Monday and Thursday on all our social channels, specifically our YouTube channel, LSU Tigers on NOLA.com. Please subscribe there. You can catch us live on Mondays and Thursdays, and if you don't catch us live, you can obviously catch us after the fact on that same YouTube channel. We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever other finer podcasts are found. Please subscribe to The Advocate if you haven't already, whether that's our print edition, our digital edition, or some combination of both. To do that, you go to theadvocate.com/subscribe and get a hold of our newsletter. Stay up to date with all the LSU topics, all the news, all the headlines. You get it straight to your inbox, straight to your phone, straight to your desktop. You go to theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. We are brought to you every Monday and Thursday by Champion Wealth Strategies. We appreciate them being aboard. To learn more, go to championwealthstrategies.com and plan like a champion today. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. We will be back. Enjoy the weekend. Enjoy a little bit of downtime before the next storm hits. For Scott Rabalais, for Wilson Alexander, and for Robert Young behind the glass, I'm Perryn Keys. This has been the LSU Sports Insider.